Hello and welcome to this short video called Handling Our Inner Critic. This is part of our Caring for Yourself series. A quick hello from us. We are from Team Boo and we support organisations to be the happiest and healthiest they can be. We do this through three main areas, so we work in coaching, in leadership and well-being. This series is all part of our well-being arm, thinking about how do we care for ourselves. And today we're looking at our inner critic. We'll be thinking about how we can handle this and how we can try and dial it back. It's important to take a little bit of time to think about how we are, because our inner critic will show up depending on how we're feeling. We can often not really realise how we're feeling, so I'm going to show you through the well-being grid really quickly. On the screen you can see we've got high, low, positive and negative energy. When we're in a space where we've got high and positive energy, this is our performance space. It's a really lovely space. We feel great, we're really efficient, we're focused, we get things done. We're a little bit more social, a little bit more patient in this space. It's a lovely space to be in, and we often wish that we could be in this space all the time. When we're in our performance space, we are likely to hear from our inner critic a little bit less. If we are in a space where we've got negative and high energy, this is our stress space. And it can be a really tricky space to be in. We tend to find people will either feel overwhelmed, might feel a little bit under pressure in this space, maybe find it difficult to get things done, difficult to concentrate, hard to focus on tasks. We might be a little bit less patient with people and have less to give to others. We're also more likely to hear from our inner critic in this space. If we are in our stress space for too long, we might end up in our burnout space, which is where we have negative and low energy. The likelihood here is that we're going to be hearing from our inner critic a lot of the time in this space, if not always. There is another space left, which is called our renewal space, which is low energy but helps us to start working towards that positive energy space. And one of the ways of renewing ourselves is by handling our inner critic and dialing our inner critic back. And that's what the focus of this webinar is going to be. What actually is our inner critic? It's that negative internal commentary on who we are and how we behave. Unfortunately, we all have one. It'll be different for everybody though. The inner critic that we hear will be based on our experiences, so how we've grown up, maybe the schools we've been to, the workplaces we've been, but all of those experiences will shape what we hear. And it can be really frustrating. We might hear it in different scenarios as well. So you might have a slightly different inner critic for work, maybe a slightly different inner critic for home. We'll start by thinking about how can we notice what our inner critic says. On the screen at the moment, you can see some of those common things that we hear. I could never do that. I'm not good enough to do that. People will realise I don't know what I'm doing. The first place to start in terms of dialing our inner critic back is noting down or noticing, what does your inner critic say to you? Part of being able to dial our inner critic back is to notice when it's at its loudest. So not only noticing what it says, but what kind of things will make it more prominent. Maybe it's when we're in that stress space. Maybe it's when we're worried about something or we're doing something new or something that makes us nervous. Maybe it's when we haven't slept very well or if we haven't had the opportunity to exercise. Take a moment to just think about when your inner critic is at its loudest for you. Once we're then aware of that, we can start making plans to try and help reduce it or to help us process that inner critic. So once we've identified what our inner critic says and the times when we hear from it most, we can start to dial it back by trying to reframe that inner critic. An idea here is to write down what your inner critic says to you and try to reframe it. Try to acknowledge it as a separate point of view rather than a realistic point of reality. Write your thoughts down as if it was the second person and try and reframe that. So, for example, if you're trying to learn something new, your inner critic might say something like, "You're not good enough to do that. You'll never be able to do that." Try and reframe it to say, "I'm currently learning how to do this. I've not got there yet, but I will do." The idea here is that we respond to our inner critic with compassion. Self-compassion is the most effective way to dial back our inner critic. It's the practice of becoming an inner ally instead of our enemy, thinking about how we treat ourselves as if we would a good friend. A starting point for thinking about how self-compassionate you are might be to take the self-compassion test. The link to this is on the screen at the moment, and what this does is it helps you to identify where you're most self-compassionate and where you're least self-compassionate. It'll give you some tips and guidance on things to do to try and increase your self-compassion. So much research that demonstrates the benefits of self-compassion, and these are not only physical health benefits, but they also have mental health benefits. What research shows us is that people experience less depression, anxiety, stress, shame, and they often feel like they have an increase in their happiness, their life satisfaction, self-confidence, and also physical health from practicing that self-compassion. So it's really worth focusing on this. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little exercise now to think about self-compassion. I want you to get a piece of paper and a pen, and I want you to imagine that your friend has had a really tough day. They come over to your house after work and they say, "Everything's gone wrong today. I've had some really awful conversations and it's just not been a great day." I want you to note down, what do you say to your friend? What words are you telling them? What did you do? What was your body language like towards your friend? What was the tone of your voice? And how did you feel towards your friend? Once you've done that, maybe pause this video to finish that and then pop a line underneath that. Once you've finished, I'd like you to then think about imagining the scenario that you have had a bad day. You've had some really tricky parts of the day and you've had some really difficult conversations. I want you to write down, what were you saying towards yourself? What did you do towards yourself? What was your body language like towards yourself? What was the tone of your voice? And how did you feel towards yourself? Maybe just pause the video now to write that down. Once you've finished, I'd like you to just reflect on those two lists. What is the difference? What did you notice between those two lists? What we often find is that people are very kind, supportive, loving towards their friend, but are maybe quite harsh, quite brutal towards themselves. And what we want you to start thinking about is, how can I treat myself like I would a friend? If you flip those lists over, if you were to imagine saying the things that you say towards yourself to a friend, you'd probably feel quite mortified. I would never say that to my friend. So why are we treating ourselves like that? We need to start thinking about how we can give ourselves the love and compassion that we give to others. There are three core elements to self-compassion. The first is giving ourselves self-kindness, being loving towards ourselves. The second is all around that common humanity and connecting with others. And then finally, there's mindfulness and being present in the current times. When we experience a threat or something in our environment that we may find dangerous or we may find tricky, our brain responds by either putting us into a fight, flight, or freeze mode. Now, what happens with our inner critic is that our inner critic will turn that stress response inwards. If we are in that fight mode, we might start being self-critical. We might start beating ourselves up with words. If we go into flight mode, we might want to isolate and be by ourselves and not see anybody. And if we go into that freeze mode, we might ruminate, so we might overplay situations and repeat them in our mind. So we can give ourselves some self-compassion in response to these three different areas. So if we are being self-critical, we can give ourselves kindness. We can treat ourselves as we would a good friend. We can give ourselves those kind words. If we are feeling like we want to isolate and not be around people, the thing that we really need to do is to actually reach out to others, to talk to people about what is happening, and to experience the fact that we will all go through these things. It's a common humanity issue. Finally, if we're ruminating, we're overplaying scenarios, we can bring in some mindfulness. So we can try and become present, and we can try and focus on what is going on at this very moment in time to help us stop replaying things. What we'll be doing there is practicing self-compassion and deactivating that threat defense system. We'll be giving ourselves some care. So, a quick reminder on what we've been through. Maybe try a self-compassion journal. Try reframing those thoughts that our inner critic tells us, and try responding as if we were talking to our best friend. Complete that online assessment. Find out where you are in terms of your self-compassion at the moment and where you could focus on. Observe your own emotions and levels of distress, and reflect regularly on your practice. Maybe even practicing a little bit of gratitude as well. As always, if you're looking for a little place to start in terms of your self-compassion and also practicing well-being, Action for Happiness have some calendars, so you can have a little tip every single day of something to look after yourself. There are also some really lovely resources. So if you are trying to help to avoid that rumination and practice some mindfulness, Headspace and Calm are really lovely apps to guide you through some of that work. And if you're really struggling with your inner critic and it's really getting the better of you, the Hub of Hope is an app where you can pop your postcode in and it will show you all the support services near you. So as we're finishing off, please just consider one small thing that can help you to prioritise your well-being today, one thing that can help dial your inner critic back. Thank you for joining us for this short video on handling our inner critic. Our social media handles are on the screen at the moment. We would love for you to be our friends. Thanks so much.